one of the most famous spy series of all time actually gets it wrong, and that's the James Bond series. He's always attractive, he's always well-spoken, he's always an amazing driver, an amazing fighter, an amazing shot, he's great with the women, and somehow he's able to operate all over the world by calling himself by his true name.
Name's Bond.
James Bond. This is not what espionage is like. Real espionage is about people who blend in, people who aren't attractive, people who don't get a second look, people who are terrible with women, people who never drive a fancy car, people who never have to pull out their gun because they're so good at keeping a secret, they can get in and get out without ever even being noticed in the first place. My name is Andrew Bustamante, and I am a former covert CIA intelligence officer and the founder of EverydaySpy.com. The public really doesn't realize that they are much closer to CIA spies than they think they are. International espionage requires a wide range of different types of look and appearance. There's a place for the very young and the very old. There's a place for the very fit and the very unfit. There's a place for tall people, short people. There's even room for people who have different religious beliefs that require them to wear different types of physical dress. But when it comes to the one type of person that has the most operational utility, you're looking for somebody who is brown but not too dark, somebody who is thin but not too thin, somebody who is middle-aged, because that's exactly the kind of person that disappears no matter where they go. Whether they're in Asia or Latin America, whether they're in Canada or Australia, they're overlooked. They're not the kind of person you remember bumping into when you're standing in line at a local coffee shop. And that's exactly the kind of gray man that CIA, MI6, and Mossad really look for when they develop a new high-performance field operative. A good covert operator is born with a certain series of skills. They are very good at thinking on their feet. They're creative, they're adaptable, they're resilient and resourceful. They're also able to blend in and disappear. These are not people who want to be the center of attention. They're the wallflowers at your school prom. They're the kids who sit in the second to last row because if they sat in the last row of the school bus, they would be noticed. The people who turn into very good spies are the people who enjoy the comfort of anonymity. Now, when an intelligence service gets a hold of this person who values anonymity, then they have this rich, fertile soil to teach them a whole slew of skills, from hacking skills to tradecraft skills to disguise to foreign language. And they can put and invest these skills into somebody knowing that that person will never show off or brag about their skills. Instead, they're going to use those advanced skills to make themselves even more invisible in front of everybody else. I often joke that I was the accidental recruit to CIA because I was not a great high school student. I was not a great college student. I came from the military, but I was not a good soldier. I was leaving the US Air Force and trying to find a job that was the exact opposite of working for the Air Force. Because as an Air Force officer, I was in command of nuclear missiles, knowing that if I turned my key, I would end human life in some place. So when the time came for me to leave the Air Force, I wanted to do something that was the polar opposite of nuclear missiles. So I found myself applying to the US Peace Corps. And in the middle of my application to Peace Corps, I actually had a screen pop up on my computer that said, based on my answers to date in my application, I might qualify for other jobs in the national security sector. Would I be willing to put my application on pause? And like any other 27-year-old, when I heard that there might be an opportunity for me to do something else, I hit yes. And I said, yes, I am willing to put my application on hold for 72 hours to see what comes of this. And that's when I got a phone call one day later from a woman who didn't tell me her last name and came from an unlisted phone number with a 703 area code, which is Langley, Virginia. And she invited me to Washington, D.C. to go through an application process that would vet me for a possible role in national security. I didn't know at the time that I was being vetted for CIA. I got a set of plane tickets in the mail. I had a rental car sent to me. I was only given enough information to make it another day, where my next hotel would be, where my next appointment would be. And that's kind of how I was carried along for the better part of 10 months as I went through test after test and interview after interview, where I was applying for and escalating through the process of becoming a CIA operative. When you think about the process for applying and interviewing to CIA, you have to take every application you've ever made from the military to a job and throw it out the window. Because the average application and interview process for CIA takes about 18 months. In fact, if you're a very qualified, high-performing candidate, the best you can do is about 9 months. My own application process took about 11 months. And over the course of that time, you are exposed to more and more intrusive, personal, and high-stakes interview styles. Sometimes you're doing role plays, sometimes you're taking psychological batteries, sometimes you're doing group or panelist interviews where you're being peppered by a panel of people that you've never talked to before. And that's not counting all the things they're doing behind the scenes, pulling your digital footprint, looking at your police background, looking at your personal finances, looking and reviewing your health history and your family history. The reason CIA uses this escalation of intrusive interview styles is for two reasons. One, they're looking to identify the specific soft skills that exist in the right candidate. But then simultaneously, they're also looking for the person who's unwilling to share certain secrets about themselves. Where's the person that's too private to share secrets about the affair they had with their spouse? Or where's the person that's afraid to talk about the fact that they're broke? Where's the person who's unwilling to share a secret about cheating on an exam in college? Because if somebody's willing to keep one secret during the interview process, you know you can't really trust that person to become loyal to the organization when they have to collect secrets of different types that relate to national security and national security policy. CIA trains with a very specific model that really doesn't exist anywhere else. They call it a 3-step model. First, you educate, then you exercise, and then you experience. They start with classroom education, and it really is that. It's just like being in a college setting. You have an instructor or two at the front of the classroom, and you have a room of anywhere from 30 to 100 new recruits who learn a skill or a concept. Immediately after that class is over, you take a short break, and then you come back for a series of exercises or role plays. Maybe you role play with another student, maybe you role play with an instructor. Immediately following that exercise, everyone is kicked out into the real world to go actually exercise the skill that they learned and the skill that was demonstrated in the field. And what happens is you will either fail or you will succeed during the process of applying that skill in the real world. And what's really powerful is because you operate alone, you're the only one who knows if you succeeded or failed with that skill. So then when you come back to the classroom the next day, you're carrying this knowledge in your own head. And it's up to you whether or not you seek additional help from a peer or from a teacher, whether you admit to your failure or whether you celebrate your success, which is part of the psychological game that must happen in order for you to develop both a loyalty to the organization, but also a sense of confidence that you can operate single-handedly in the field. And CIA invests a great deal in your training, specifically because they do not want to invest in your therapy. They look for people who are capable of doing both wonderful and terrible things and still be able to sleep at night. Because they know that if for some reason you're overwhelmed, if for some reason you crack under pressure, if for some reason you break during an operation, there is much more at stake than just your life. When I actually started training with CIA, I started to have a series of self-discoveries. First, I started to discover that many of the things that I suspected my whole life, many of the things that caused me frustration and disappointment with society, were actually very viable things that CIA taught me to understand later on. It taught me to understand that there really isn't a sense of fairness or transparency or honesty that human beings carry from place to place. It doesn't exist in church. It doesn't exist in the professional workplace. It doesn't exist in the military. So for me, growing up, it was always very challenging whenever I saw hypocrisy or whenever I saw people go against their word or people not fulfill their promises. I never understood how it was acceptable. How is it that President Clinton could lie on the stand?
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
And yet somehow still become a popular president, even though everyone tries to say that there are standards of behavior and there are codes of conduct and there are social norms. In reality, all of those things are flexible. So for example, ethics and morals are not the same thing. And that's something that the average person doesn't really think about or understand. Ethics are actually something that's defined by your profession. It's something that comes from outside, an external source. If you're an attorney, there's a code of ethics for attorneys. If you're a doctor, there's a code of ethics for doctors. If you're a teacher, there's a code of ethics for teachers. It's defined outside of you, where morals are actually something that's defined internal to you. It's something that you believe to be true, something that you believe to be important. Maybe that's something that was taught to you as a child or something that you developed on your own. So when you join CIA, they teach you that CIA, have their own code of ethics. And that code of ethics is really quite short because we are what's known as an organization of last resort. Meaning if CIA gets a mission, it's because nobody else in the American government can do it. But morally, what it means is that you have to be flexible with your own personal morals. And a big part of what makes a CIA officer successful is what's known as moral flexibility, or the ability to believe one thing today as moral and something else tomorrow as equally just as moral. Because sometimes you have to hurt a bad guy to save a good guy. Sometimes you have to steal from a criminal in order to get what you need to protect someone else. And you have to be able to sleep with yourself at night, no matter what you do. One of the most interesting questions I get from people is, what is the one most important character trait to be a good spy? And I find this question to be really interesting because it's a shocking answer, in my opinion. The most important thing CIA or Mossad or MI6 looks for when they make a possible new spy is somebody who seeks validation from an external source. They're looking for somebody who is so loyal and so dependent on external validation that they will lie, steal, cheat, commit crimes, cross borders, change their name, do anything they have to do in order to get validation and approval from that one focused external source. And when CIA finds a person like that, they can train that person to become dependent on CIA. And then the loyalty of that individual becomes so focused on the institution that they don't need any other attention from anywhere else as long as they serve the one organization that validates and appreciates their work. So any rational person would have to ask the question whether or not CIA's behavior is in line with the behavior of a cult. And the answer is yes, absolutely. Because the loyalty that you have to the Central Intelligence Agency has to come above your loyalty to anything else. Higher than your loyalty to your parents, higher than your loyalty to your spouse, higher than the loyalty you have to your own children. Because when you sacrifice everything at the behest of a mission to keep people safe by stealing secrets, you can't let anything else come before that. And I was one of those people who absolutely welcomed an excuse to terminate all of my old military friends, to jump off of social media, to stop answering email, to change my phone number, to change my address and not even tell my parents where I was moving to. What we say to ourselves at CIA is mission first, family always, which is still mission first. And that is absolutely in line with the way that cults cultivate their own followers. They make people absolutely dependent on the cult, the organization, the foundation, the principle first. So you have to consider the fact that based on objective reality, yes, there are many behaviors at CIA that are in line with the behaviors of a religious cult. Use yourself as a test case here. If you're still listening to me talk right now, if you've heard me explain what it's like to go through the recruitment process, you've heard me talk about what it's like to be a spy, you've heard me talk about what the realities of spy life are like versus the movies, and you're still watching, that's a good sign that you actually have what it takes to consider being an actual undercover operative, because thousands of other people have already stopped watching this video. Thousands of people saw the headline and never even clicked on the video. But the fact that you are not only still watching, but excited to hear what comes next goes to show that you already have some of that psychological foundation, that moral flexibility, that resilience, that courage, that independence, that willingness to cut off all of your old life in order to pursue a new life. You have that risk tolerance already inside you. Whether you've ever known it or not, it's there. And that's what's so powerful about CIA. It doesn't care about the majority of people. It's there to preserve national security. And if you have that level of pragmatic thought, if you're willing to accept that there's a difference between people and institutions, then that shows that you are the kind of person that could potentially fit into the category of covert operative.
Want to support the channel? Join the Big Think members community where you get access to videos early, ad-free.